Tonight on News 5 Live, a proposed agreement with the PSU runs into trouble and the Prime Minister, Dean Barrow, says government will proceed to amend the public service regulations if the unions don't agree to the proposed cost-saving measures. While the writing is on the wall for the super bond payment, the PM says who comes next will have to talk to the IMF. An ease of the state of emergency. Swimming is now allowed. Church service can take place with 10 persons. Hotel restaurants are open for outside dining. Belmopan resident Guillermo Foreman to be charged for illegal entry into Belize. 3 Mexican fishermen are detained for immigration and fisheries offenses after they were busted while fishing inside the Bacalar Chico Marine Reserve. And we'll hear from Lord Michael Ashcroft. We get his views on the reopening of the economy and tourism. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
In these challenging times,
Welcome to News 5 Live for Thursday, May 14th. I am Marlene Cuellar. It's a big day of news, so we start with the negotiations between the Prime Minister, the Public Service Union, and the Belize National Teachers Union. That matter is back to square one, and the unions are consulting on a position before the deal can be sealed. Union leaders met with the Prime Minister virtually on Wednesday to attempt to resolve the impasse over the government's proposed cost-saving measures. In order to meet its monthly cost of $90 million, the government is asking public servants and teachers to forego increments. While the APSSM supports the government's proposal, the PSU in particular opposes it, saying that public officers are willing to make the sacrifice, but under certain terms and conditions. After the meeting on Wednesday, it was understood that cooler heads prevailed and the issues were ironed out. That is what the Prime Minister also thought, until he received a letter from Senator Elena Smith, the national president of the Belize National Teachers Union, who also spoke on behalf of the Public Service Union. In the letter, Smith told Barrow that certain words need to be changed because they do not represent the union's position. One of those words is forego, as explained by Prime Minister Barrow.
We made clear that we, government, could not move from our position that the increments had to be foregone. Now, I think the difficulty arises over the meaning of foregone. We explained it in this way. From the start, we had said you lose your increments for 2020, 2021. But for any public officer, as soon as that public officer reaches retirement age, after 2021, after the fiscal year, end fiscal year 2021, for purposes of calculating your retirement benefits, we will act as though that foregone increment, we will treat it as part of the mix. Indeed, because the modalities of actually achieving that can be a little bit tricky, we agreed on the formation of a small committee that would examine exactly how the calculations would take place. But I don't need to trouble you with the particulars of that. The fact is, the agreement, government's position was you forego the increments, although at the time of retirement, those increments or the foregone increment will be inputted into the formula for determining your pension benefits. The unions, or at least two of the unions, said, oh no, we only want the increments to be deferred until a time certain. Meaning, I think in one case they said 2 years. They came up with another possible formula as soon as there is a 2% GDP growth. We absolutely, government that is, refuse to accept that. Where we are now is that they don't want to stick by the language that had been read out at the end of the meeting. They want to change the language to say that the increments will not be foregone, they will be deferred, even though they say deferred until retirement is reached. For me, it's not a distinction without a difference. That was the crux of the matter. Words have meanings. We agreed yesterday that it was a question of foregoing the increments, and I'm afraid that government is determined to stick to that.
According to the Prime Minister, foregoing increments are required, and if the unions continue to reject the proposal, the next step would be to proceed to amend the public service regulations to allow the minister to alter salaries, emoluments, and allowances. This is viewed as a threat by the PSU, which says that while the Prime Minister is determined, he does not have the legal authority to make the decision individually. PM Barrow says that the best way to offset a $373 million deficit without cutting salaries or staff is for public servants to forego increments.
Listen, this is a small price for you to pay, that is, the foregoing of the increments, and we are determined that that price should be paid in the context of the larger picture. We wish for you to agree. If you don't agree, we will do it in any event. We are going to do it. And to try to put ourselves on the best possible footing for doing it, we contemplate the amendment of the public service regulations to give the minister the legal power to alter the terms and conditions. Remember, that ultimately, when we finished with the three-phase increases in salary, we added $75 million annually to the wage bill, to government's wage bill, with respect to public officers. And that's apart from the 2% increment every year. So in effect, this increment is an additional salary increase in the context of what everybody else is going through. However they describe it, and I'm saying that I accept their description, it is still not nearly enough. I did something last week, but I think it is important that I do it again, coming from a different angle. Marisol, and I went through this with them yesterday. Look at the budget book. Look at the allocations. The budgeted allocations for 2020-2021 are as follows. Recurrent revenues are projected, or were projected. We'll have to, at some stage, 3 or 4 months from now, go and do a whole new budget, but for now. Recurrent revenues are projected at $1,206 million. Emoluments and pensions, salaries, those are $688 million. Goods and services, $299 million. Debt service, interest and principal, $230 million. So the total spending, of which the biggest line is the $688 million for salaries, the total spending before any capital expenditure is $1,270 million. The optimistic projections are for government to lose 30% of its recurrent revenue. So instead of the $1,206 million, we would collect no more than $844 million. That immediately gives you a deficit of $373 million.
As we said, nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to, so the unions continue to consult. With a burgeoning deficit of over $300 million, Barrow says that the time has come to trim emoluments and pensions, which stand at $688 million. The international financial institutions have been advising his government to do so for quite some time now, but the PM managed to avoid taking the bitter pill. According to the Prime Minister, due to the harsh and crippling economic impact of COVID-19, international institutions such as the IMF would strengthen their call for government to reduce debt. And as he makes his way out of office, Barrow warns that whoever becomes the next Prime Minister would need to go to international financial institutions for necessary lending post-COVID-19.
However it is pitched, there is this now, in my view, deafening cry on the part of the international financial sector, on the part of the multilaterals, for some kind of debt relief, some kind of debt standstill, some kind of possible debt forgiveness to take place. We are naturally anxiously following this discussion. The next super bond payment is due in August. We want to see where this discussion will lead before we take a position and begin some sort of a conversation with our bondholders. On the other hand, there are those who would say the writing is very clearly on the wall. And then, as to your first question, well, if I wanted to take the view that because my departure from electoral politics is both inevitable and imminent, depending on how you describe imminent, I could not worry about various things. I would then cop out of this whole contretemps, if you will, with the unions. I could say, what does it matter if I agree with you that in 2 years' time you get it back? I won't be here for you to collect it from. But I don't think that's responsible. I don't think that's fair. Ultimately, as part of our efforts at recovery, who comes next, in my view, will more likely than not have to talk to the IMF. Who comes next will have to talk to the IFIs generally. Who comes next will need assistance, serious funding assistance. Any chance of further commercial borrowing is shot. So we will have to go to these people, and they will extract their pound of flesh. And maybe that's not even the right way to frame it. It's a kind of old automatic. They won't give you the assistance that you require, except they say, aha, you will no longer be able to proceed as though you are heedless to what we have been telling you for years and years and years. A conditionality or a condition for the assistance that you will need is in fact pension reform, is in fact the trimming of the wage bill, is in fact retrenchment in the public sector. No. If I were still in play, I could sit here and tell you I would find a way to dodge that. But when you don't have to face the music, you can pretend to be the most skillful dancer in the world, you know. Bottom line is, I grieve for my poor beliefs, and I certainly extend my sympathy from now to those that will have to deal with that particular problem.
Back in March, the Prime Minister announced that he had secured financial aid from international financial institutions for government's COVID-19 response. He said that it would come from international institutions such as the Inter-American Development Bank, World Bank, and the Central American Bank for Economic Integration. The funds would total roughly $140 million. So where is the money? PM Barrow says it's still not here.
What we are hoping to get from the IFIs now, those are holding funds. Those are funds to help us with the food assistance program, with the unemployment relief program, with help for the farmers in agriculture. Those have nothing to do with the kinds of structural changes that will be necessary for the economy and the fiscal position and public finances to recover. We will need help for that recovery. In every single case, we were given a timeline. The nearest, the closest disbursement date is from the IDB, and that's for the $6.2 million US that's supposed to come for assistance to the health sector. And we've been given the date of 28th May as the date on which the IDB board is expected to sign off finally and disbursements can begin.
The tourism industry is practically on life support. It accounts for about 40% of the gross domestic product and is a huge foreign exchange earner. And while domestic tourism is back in play, it can never meet the millions of dollars in revenue from international tourists. There has been talk in the private sector that with the economic fallout, foreign exchange will be hard to come by. The Prime Minister says that it is below the 3-month importation mark.
I don't know exactly where we are now. It changes from moment to moment. We're certainly below, I would hazard, and I think the last report the central bank showed me confirmed that we're certainly below the 3 months import cover that ought to be the benchmark. We're not yet, though, at a point where the central bank has to step in and ration the foreign exchange disbursements. The commercial banks are still, in fact, serving their customers who need foreign exchange to continue importing. I believe, though, that between the commercial banks and the central bank, there is a kind of priority list that has been developed. But the short answer to your question is, while we're certainly not where we would like to be or ought to be in the middle of a pandemic, we are still managing up to this point in time.
We'll hear more from the Prime Minister later in the newscast. Turning to the state of emergency, the national curfew remains in place tonight as the country relaxes some of the restrictions in place since April 1st. And if you expect the 5 to 8 curfew hours for adults to end very soon, Attorney General Michael Perrafid says this is very likely to go for another 6 weeks. Here's how he explains it.
Curfew remains in place.
Thank you.
8 o'clock tonight, 8 o'clock from, put it this way, I can almost assure you, it's up to the National Oversight Committee, not to me. But for the things that we want to accomplish, I can also assure you, from now till the end of June, the curfew will be in place. 8 the night, you have to be in your house till 5 the morning, unless you're a permitted member under the national security apparatus or a healthcare worker. 8 o'clock, the curfew begins. It does not end until 5 in the morning the next day. The curfew is still on for children. That goes from 8 a.m. in the morning until 6 in the evening. So at 6 p.m., if you're under 16, you have to be inside. 8 p.m., if you're an adult, you have to be inside. That has not changed.
As Belize records another day without an active case of COVID-19, the public gets a relief on some of the restrictions. One of the big changes is the allowance of district-to-district movement. The Attorney General, who spoke at length this afternoon, explains the relaxation of this restriction and what is expected of you as you travel.
You are now able to move from district to district. So let me give you an example. If you have not seen your family for the past month or 6 weeks or so, and you're moving and you live in Belize City, and you want to go the Dangriga, or the example you gave every time you come here, Dorian, a person has a home in Belize City but they live in Belmopan, you are now free to move from district to district, community to community freely. However, you must be moving, and you must be moving with a purpose. So if you're going to Halo, Granada, Dangriga, get in your car and just go to Dangriga now. Don't stop the 3-4 place along the way, take 2 beer, and then always be moving with a purpose. But remember, when you're in the house with them, or when you're enjoying your family, social distance at all times. Social distance. Because it's important to ensure that we protect ourselves and our families. If you're moving from one locality to the next, you don't know what you're taking or what you may be meeting. So also remember to keep that social distance always in place, even when you're at home. I mean, for as much as you can.
Coming up, balancing economic health and medical health. We'll hear from Lord Michael Ashcroft on this and other issues. The tourism industry is at a standstill, and Belize is one of 3 countries in the region to become the biggest casualty of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, further measures were announced to spur internal tourism going forward. But the Philip Golson International Airport is not to reopen before July 1st for international visitors. Tourism is one of the biggest contributors to foreign exchange and employment. So there is a lot of focus in the sector despite the fragility of the industry. This morning, Lord Michael Ashcroft sat on the couch in our studios and gave his perspective on a number of issues, now that a first wave of COVID-19 has been contained. In respect of the rebounding of the economy, Lord Ashcroft says that while there are risks, the economic health of the country is a priority.
The difficulty is what we do from this particular point.
Yeah.
Now, for example, tourism in this country is over 40% of our GDP. And yesterday, Standard & Poor's issued a report as to which of 122 nations were in the most trouble where tourism was concerned and the consequences on the economy. Belize was number 3. And number one was Aruba. And yesterday, Aruba announced that they were going to open up in the second half of next month, subject to certain limitations. The World Health Organization yesterday said the virus may never go away. So we now have the balance between medical health and the economic health of the nation. If you listen to strict medical advice and you listen to everything, you won't open your borders for another year or so. But the consequence of that will be a nation that becomes virtually bankrupt. Devaluation will start to slowly rise as a necessary issue. The foreign currency to the country dries up. And so the more that you try then to protect the health side, there is a residual risk. And as you try to act to even stop a residual risk, then your economy is crashing. And at that point, the politicians have to make the decision and take that risk, where the economic health of the country is the major factor, and have to accept that there may well be a residual risk that the country has to take in order to get its economy back. People like myself tick a few boxes of vulnerability. I'm over 70, I'm a diabetic, sadly slightly overweight, and I've recovered from sepsis in the last few years. So for people like myself, we are at higher risk. But we have to face the consequences of that. We can't expect any nation to protect us where the economy of that nation is going to be bust. And the government of Belize can't keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. Where's the foreign exchange going to come from? We import a lot. And so that political risk at some point has to be taken.
The COVID-19 pandemic has had a huge negative impact on health and the economy. Lord Ashcroft admits it is not an easy choice when balancing the two sectors, but he asserts that it is one that politicians are entrusted to make.
Life is not about the best of choices. Life is about least worst alternatives. And when you're faced with least worst alternatives, there is always a counter-argument. And this is where the nation elects its politicians to have to make those hard choices between the medical health of a nation and the economic health of a nation. And you will always get people who believe that it's quite acceptable for a nation to go bankrupt to save some lives, and it's an understandable point of view. And you'll get others who believe the economic health at some point is the most important one, and that if there is no perfect solution, to do the best that one can to balance those two sides of the equation. It's a difficult choice that has to be made, and that is what the politicians have faced. And I said to the Prime Minister right at the beginning of this, I said, for every Prime Minister or leader, you will not know if you've made the right decisions except in hindsight rather than foresight.
A mega project in the tourism industry has been on the drawing board for years. Waterloo Investment Holdings is proposing to invest $200 million to expand the Port of Belize so that much bigger cargo ships can come in through a deeper channel. But the investment has been languishing for some time, going from committee to committee. This morning, Lord Ashcroft said time is running out.
It's a proposal to develop the bulk handling and the cruise terminal, because the cruise liners have basically said that as their ships get bigger in the future, that within 2 to 3 years' time, that they don't want to necessarily come to ports that have to tender their passengers in. So the time is running out for Belize, and the discussions on doing something here has been going on for a number of years. And of course, with the pandemic on at the moment and the uncertainty that there is, this is a project that there are 3 projects running. You've got the Feinstein one at State Bank, but that is a tender back into Belize City, and you've got a GEG one further down the coast, but which will, I suspect, will have difficulty financing that one, and you have the one from Waterloo. But the project is of such a size that unless and until it can be embraced by a government to work together to do something, it's probably going to be very difficult to do.
National elections are scheduled for this year, but the date is anyone's guess. COVID-19 has put a wrench in most things. The UDP is yet to elect a new leader, and the war chest of the political parties may not be overflowing for general elections. With the pandemic ravaging the country, is there an appetite to come out to vote? The Prime Minister says he has not been focusing on national elections. But one school of thought is that elections should be held early to give time for a new administration to begin the work of restoring the health of the economy.
But where Belize is concerned, right now, we also have an issue of a general election that is coming up. And some of the decisions can be clouded by political decisions as well as medical decisions or economic decisions. And in an ideal world, I would like that election to come early so that whoever the government is and whoever the next Prime Minister is has a 5-year mandate to be able to start to resolve these complicated issues without having too much of a political consideration in the decision-making of what the nation has to face today.
I have not had any time to even give any consideration to that. This is a crisis of the moment, and it is an all-consuming crisis. Clearly at the back of my mind, I must, however non-overtly, recognize that a point will come when we will have to, in the United Democratic Party, look at a convention date. In terms of the general elections, again, it is my expectation, not just my hope, that we will be sufficiently far advanced by the time the sort of last possible date for holding the general elections, if you count back from the date of the last general elections, by the time that new date comes, I expect that we will be in a position where the country will be able to hold the general elections. But again, we don't know. I repeat that the experts keep telling us, prepare for the possibility of a second wave, contemplate as well the chance that there could be a third wave. So I can't put it any higher than that. I expect we will be ready. If it turns out that we're not, then we deal with that situation at that time.
After the break, 3 Mexicans are detained for fishing inside Belizean waters. International travel has come to a halt with the closing of the international airport and borders in almost every country. Here in Belize, ports of entries remain closed, only cargo is allowed, and only citizens from other countries are allowed to travel out of Belize. This week, American Airlines and Southwest Airlines announced that international flights to the region will slowly resume in the coming months. Prime Minister Barrow says that phase is still in discussion, with the hope of reopening the PGIA by July 1st.
Discussion of this new phase in the easing of restrictions naturally begs the multi-million-dollar question: when will our borders reopen, and when, in particular, will the PGIA recommence operations? I'm afraid I have no comprehensive answer to give, but I can say this much. We are contemplating special and differential treatment for the PGIA with the hope that general entry into Belize by air can begin even before entry by land and sea. Thus, a July 1st restart for international flights is the fervent hope of us all. Indeed, it has been the trigger for contingency tourism planning that is now well advanced. Unfortunately, however, we must concede the distinct possibility of a pushback. Unless, for instance, either a rapid test is available for us to screen visitors, or those visitors can produce a satisfactory passport immunity certificate, it is difficult to see how we could proceed. Otherwise, we will run unacceptable risks that could result in undoing all we have so far been able to achieve in this extended anti-coronavirus campaign. I certainly see that it is very possible, maybe even likely, that we can reach a point before July 1st that would then allow us to reopen the PGIA for July 1st. But it is not by any means a matter of certainty, and that is why I stress that the nature of this COVID-19 pandemic is such that targets are constantly moving, goalposts are constantly shifting, and in that context, it is unfortunate but necessary for us to enter the reservations that I have just articulated. I am sorry that it cannot be any more definite than that, but in terms of COVID-19, that is the nature of the beast.
Dozens of Belizean students remain stuck in different parts of the world when the state of emergency was imposed. They have been unable to return because of the closure of borders, and the new law prohibits everyone, including Belizeans, from entering the country. Since there is containment of COVID-19 in Belize, students and other Belizeans, such as diplomats, can begin planning their return. According to the PM, students will need to write the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, after which arrangements will be made for them to return home. As part of the arrangement, the students will be put in mandatory quarantine at their own cost.
It may well be that the number of Belizeans could be such that special charter flights could be put on by the airlines that Belizeans would be able to pay for without taxing the government any further. But I would concede that as things now stand, the Mexico route via Cancun would appear to be what is most in play. That is why we are very careful in saying, look, you can come, but let's do a kind of census. Let us have you indicate who you are, when it is that you want to come and how, by what route you expect to come, so that we can then say, all right, we will initially accept a group of 50 perhaps, and the health people and those that are in charge of logistics will better advise us. Remember, this is a work in progress, but we will determine then how many at any given time we can accept, bearing two factors in mind. Number one, when you come, you will have to be quarantined, and you don't get out of that quarantine for 14 days, at which point you will be tested, and it is only if you test negative that you are going to be released.
3 Mexican fishermen have been arrested for illegal fishing in Belize. The Belize Coast Guard's maritime law enforcement team busted the Mexican trio in the Bacalar Chico area around 3:30 this morning. The Coast Guard's report says that the vessel tried to evade the patrol team, and in the process they dumped their products and gears overboard. The MLET eventually caught the illegal fishers and detained them. The release says, quote, "They were immediately issued PPEs and proper quarantine measures were initiated," unquote. It is expected that they will face immigration and fisheries charges, as well as for violation of the current statutory instrument. When we spoke with DHS Dr. Marvin Manzanero this afternoon, he says that the ministry is involved to swab the men.
Just found out there's some Mexicans that were caught off San Pedro, of the island of San Pedro fishing. So the determination was made that they were going to be swabbed and taken to the quarantine area in Corozal, since we already have people there. Wait out their time before they are released, and then the police take that up in their hands.
We'll have more on this story in our newscast on Friday. Where is Guillermo Foreman tonight? The Belmopan resident who is stuck at the Santa Elena border in the north for days and not allowed entry into Belize remains in police custody pending charges. Today, Prime Minister Dean Barrow referred to Belizean border jumpers during his virtual press conference, saying that after quarantine, these persons who do not get bail will be incarcerated at the central prison. But Minister of National Security Michael Perifit went further and confirmed this afternoon that Foreman will be charged with illegal entry into Belize.
From what I was told by the police is that he entered Belize. The borders are closed. So he broke the law. So he will be charged for entering the country illegally.
And that's quite simple.
You know, people have this concept about no man's land. You don't got no man's land, you know. You're either in Belize or Mexico, one out of the two. And that space between the bridge that Chetomal and the actual immigration,
It's still Belize.
that Belize, you know. So you can't say, well, I don't reach the immigration point and you're in Belize yet, man. You're in Belize, man.
Once you cross the mid-channel of the Rio Hondo.
You're in Belize.
The Belizean border jumpers will continue to face criminal charges, but they too will be quarantined before their trial can even begin. They will be swabbed even before they're taken to court to be arraigned. And after arraignment, if they're given bail, they still go back into quarantine. If they're not given bail, they go back into quarantine. And at the end of the 14 days, those that have not been given bail will be transferred to the central prison.
Late on Wednesday night, the long-awaited prices for LPG were released. If you've been following the LPG war, the prices is a thorny issue for the ex-importers of liquid petroleum gas. The National Gas Company is now the sole supplier, but the 5 former importers believe that they can import LPG at prices lower than that of the National Gas Company. News 5's Isani Cayetano crunches the numbers in the following report.
The price of butane on the retail market since the National Gas Company became the only supplier of liquefied petroleum gas in the country remains a point of contention for several past importers who controlled the industry prior to April 30th. On Wednesday, the Supplies Control Unit introduced new fixed prices for butane on the wholesale and retail floors. Jose Trejo, Director of the Belize Bureau of Standards, breaks down the new price regime.
We have a wholesale price, and then now we have urban retail and rural retail prices. As it relates to the wholesale price, that wholesale price is fully determined by the new investment of the National Gas Company Limited, which falls under the National Liquefied Petroleum Gas Project. That's Act number 12 of 2019. So that sets within that act, there is a specific structure for the price build-up on the wholesale. And as you would imagine, it includes your acquisition costs, your freight, your marine, your insurance, what it costs to land that product in Belize. So that you would have there your port dues, your brokerage fees, your throughput fee. I think it would include your environmental tax.
And that price structure does not take into account a user fee, which is essentially the cost of financing the project, as well as regulatory fees. Those are just a few of the variables that are factored into the new cost of doing business. That notwithstanding, the former LPG importers argue that the cost per gallon has gone up under this new regime.
It's bad news. The response is that consumers in this country should be concerned. The price for LPG into your home has actually gone up. It has gone up by 31 cents. And how do we calculate that increase when we look at what was the price before and what is the price now? And for the new SI that came out, the new price to the consumer is $3.86 per gallon. That is in the urban areas, and then in the rural areas, it's $3.96. So just add or subtract 31 cents on any of those costs, and you'll see that it has gone up by 31 cents, effective yesterday, because that SI was signed into law yesterday.
In rationalizing the cost of butane on the retail market, Trejo says that profit margins also had to be factored in, as well as the cost of transportation to rural areas.
And the retail basically is one of looking at the margins that would be necessary for us to allow the distributors and the retailers to enjoy a decent margin downstream. And that is based on the transportation costs and what have you to move product from one point A to point B, right? So the margins that you see there from wholesale to the retail urban is $1.60, and then from there, there's an additional 10 cents to move product from a municipality to peripheral rural communities. So that's in the essence how the price is set.
According to PM Barrow, Cabinet has given NGC the go-ahead to proceed with its operations, and in the months ahead, consumers will see an expansion of the company's distribution network.
The green light has been given to the National Gas Company, and so they are just starting, but will, of course, expand their distribution network as quickly as possible. In terms of the prices, the new pricing structure, as far as I have been told, does include some small increase in the wholesale price. Presumably that's going to find its way down to the consumer, but I'm not sure what the end result is going to be. So let me hold my fire until the picture becomes clearer.
So just how does the incoming price structure compare with the previous price regime?
What we had in the past is basically the importing companies who import the product, the wholesale product, they distribute the product, and they retail the product. So throughout the entire supply and distribution chain of LPG, they're at every point of the distribution chain. What this does right now with the new structure is it kind of levels the playing field, so that a small operator maybe who has a tank, a bobtail of maybe over 2,400 gallons, or can go to the NGC directly to purchase at the wholesale price of $226.
Reporting for News 5, I am Isani Cayetano.
When we come back, you don't have to wear a mask to exercise, and other good news about heading to the beach. More on the ease of the restrictions. When it comes to churches and other religious and faith-based groups, there is a small bit of good news tonight. A 10-person per service good news. That's what the Attorney General announced today on the Ask the Experts webcast. Church service can now resume, but the maximum number of persons allowed is limited to 10. Michael Perifeet explains that it comes with some restrictions as well.
A church or place of public worship in any facility or public place which involves the participation of any member of the general public or a congregation is allowed to operate under the following conditions. No care how big the church, you can't have more than 10 people. So your church could be the size of Civic. You still can't have more than 10 people. Remember we said for the shops, the amount of people who could go into the shop depends on the size of the shop. Now in this case, look how big the church big. No more than 10 people. And if your church that small and can hold people, 10 people, so that they can be 1 pair of feet apart, then you can't hold 10 people. Because the social distancing laws and the protocols will trump anything that these allow you to do. So the church will be able to have service. Whilst you're in church, everybody must have on a mask during the service. If you're at church, you have to wear a mask. I guess except when you have to take Holy Communion for those who take Holy Communion. No children shall be allowed to participate in the mass. So no picnic will go to church, physically in our building a church. Now when we say children, we differentiate from when we said before 16 and below the curfew applies to. When we say children in this case, nobody under 12 years old is allowed to attend the church service. So if you're between 12 and 16, you're still a minor, but you're not a child. And if you're 15, for example, you could go to church.
And on the topic of churches, choirs are not allowed. Shifting to some of the restrictions that have been relaxed for restaurants, those open-air restaurants will be allowed to accommodate diners, but those persons will be limited to 10 per table and must be on reservation basis only. All other restaurants must continue to operate with takeout and delivery service. And if you're wondering if you will see your favorite taco vendor on the street side, the AG says that remains a strong no. Those vendors must continue to operate from a private location. But what's the status on rum shops, casinos, and bars?
Street vendors and food trucks are still out, and I know exactly where to get to. Street vendors and tacos and they're on the street. They're in a public place. An open-air restaurant will be in a defined area, a defined property off the street. So even though you might have an open-air restaurant, it's not on public property. And not only that, it is prepared in some form of controlled environment, not in the open air for the most part. But I don't want to argue for the NOC, but we said it the last time and we continuously say it. You can prepare your tacos on private property, do your barbecue on private property, and then just do takeout and delivery, and you're good to go. Discotheques, bars, rum shops, nightclubs, closed. Gymnasiums, sporting complexes remain closed. There's been a push for gymnasiums, but the National Oversight Committee said it's best for gyms to remain closed. Casinos and gambling establishments are closed. Still no bolido.
And as a reminder, daycare centers, childcare centers, nurseries, and other similar place of businesses remain closed. You can also now beat the heat in the pool or river or the sea. AG Perfit says you are not allowed to go swimming, but with some limitations to socializing on the poolside or the seaside. And for those divers and snorkelers, you are also allowed to engage in some recreation, but you cannot go fishing for leisure while you engage in these water activities.
Our public pools, beaches, and rivers are open to the public for the specific purpose of swimming and the following conditions. What are we opening the pools, rivers, and seas for? To swim. I remember for the people who want to scuba dive or snorkel, they can snorkel. But even when you go to a river or the sea, you must strictly adhere to social distancing protocols, except as it relates to parents or guardians and their children and to persons of the same party. So if 4 or 5 people want to swim the sea or the river, and you have a young child and you want to dip the child and swim in the river or the sea, clearly you have to be close to that child. No more than 10 persons in the same party or the same group can go together at any one time at the river and swim and hang out by the river. Social gatherings, parties, picnics, barbecues, or other similar social activities are prohibited. We go to the river and the sea, figure swim, dive shops and scuba diving and snorkeling are also now allowed. So if you're a dive shop, you're now allowed to open from 5 in the morning to 7 at night. So no night diving, 5 in the morning to 7 at night. If you're a dive, if you want to scuba dive, you can scuba dive during that time. However, whilst you're scuba diving, you're not allowed to engage in any fishing activity, because you still can't fishing for sport or anything like that.
So
not as yet.
No spear fishing.
No spear fishing. You scuba dive. You observe the beautiful underwater world that we have in Belize, and do not shoot any fish. Do not go fishing for sport or anything like that. We're getting some reports that some people may use it as an excuse to go and swim but then fish for sport. You will be arrested and you will be charged.
And there is a little relief for those who exercise. You are now allowed to run, jog, walk, or cycle without a mask. But again, you are to do these activities during the hours of 5 to 8 in the mornings only.
The exercise hours will remain from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. 5 the morning till 8 the morning, not 5 the night till 8 the night. Some people still try to exercise the night and they've been arrested because of 5 the morning till 8 the morning. So between those 3 hours, that's the law. You no longer have to wear a mask when you're jogging, running, walking, or cycling. No. Let me warn people. No get cute, you know, because they will lock you up. No, they walk down the street without a mask, and when the policeman they pull up, you start to run and say, well, I'm in the jog officer, I'm in the run. So I don't need no mask, you're going to jail.
Coming up after the break, we'll tell you about the result of an autopsy of a 5-month-old baby.
As we continue to
On Sunday afternoon near the outskirts of Hattieville, 29-year-old Blaine Calliz came face-to-face with a team of officers who trained their weapons on him as he exited what they believed was a runaway ambulance. Police intelligence had informed them that the driver of a Southern Emergency Services vehicle was being held at gunpoint and forced to carry a supply of guns and drugs to Belize City. After reportedly running 2 checkpoints, a roadblock was set up to arrest the flight of the out-of-control ambulance, which, as it turned out, was transporting a patient to the KHMH. Calliz, who has since taken a leave of absence from work, traveled to Belize City today to clear the air on what transpired, beginning with the absurd notion that he was being held hostage.
To me, I do not know. Whoever came up with that idea is the person that would be the fittest to give you that answer.
Now, when you exited the ambulance outside of Hattieville and guns were trained on you, what was your immediate reaction? Because it's completely unusual, to say the least, that an ambulance driver would have guns drawn on him in that manner.
I was taken aback. It was surprising, but it is the police department. I need to comply. I can't do nothing else.
They are saying, however, that your attitude and behavior left a lot to be desired for any professional, including an EMT.
At the first checkpoint, we stopped. We talked to the police. I did not disrespect him in any way. And if I did, he needs to come forth and tell me that he felt disrespected. And I will apologize to him. The second checkpoint, the officers, I believe, was doing their job, clearing the way because they have heard us ambulance coming. And in the third instance where the roadblock was, when I came out, my patient is priority. That is the reason why I am in the EMS, to save a life. So when I came out, that is what I told them. If my patient passes away, you guys are to blame.
Earlier this week, Commissioner of Police Chester Williams demanded an apology from Calliz for his behavior during the incident and said that if an apology was not forthcoming, charges would be brought against the emergency medical technician. Calliz says that he does not know what he would be apologizing for since he was only carrying out the mandate of his job.
I do not know which law I broke, and if the commissioner is demanding an apology from me, he needs to let me know what I need to apologize for. Because I, as an ambulance driver, am here to save lives. That is my job. And I believe that I was carrying out my job to the best of my ability.
On Tuesday, we reported the death of a 5-month-old baby from Bear Vista Village. The initial report reaching our newsroom was that the child was administered a vaccine at the Independence Polyclinic, but the baby girl, Kinsley Jasmine Cal, died 4 to 5 days later after she got ill, showing signs of respiratory problems and a fever. The Ministry of Health received the report and launched an investigation, which is still ongoing. But now the autopsy has been completed, and today DHS Dr. Marvin Manzanero gave an update saying that there is no link between a vaccine and the baby's death.
The initial report had indicated that the baby had apparently died from dehydration and not getting adequate and timely care. This is a 5-month child. You can get dehydrated very quickly, and it would seem that after they left the facility, there were some complications that the baby started having, dehydration, fever, but they didn't seek medical care until it was a little bit too late. I did get the autopsy report earlier from Dr. Bear, and I can go back and look textually at what is written, because that's the official report, but it's not related to the vaccine. The official cause of death was asphyxiation by bronchial aspiration. So that means that the baby actually had some of the stomach content go into the both lungs, and that's the reason for why the baby had died. One of the findings that the autopsy has revealed is that the patient had an acute enlargement of the heart. so that would have been maybe a precondition to the baby being ill. Of course, you would not have been able to determine that unless you do an autopsy or unless the baby had other signs or symptoms which had not been related to us.
Up next, Healthy Living looks at staying fit at home. It's been over 4 weeks since the last confirmed case of COVID-19 in Belize. Now that the first wave has been contained, it has led to some easing of movement restrictions and opening of more businesses. But if you're a fitness buff, we're sorry to report that there's still no gym access. So tonight in Healthy Living, we've compiled some options for you to keep fit while at home. The pandemic has forced us to all get creative in many of our routine activities. Homeschooling, work from home, and now even exercise from home. If you're looking to stay active, you can still go out between 5 and 8 a.m. for a walk or run. But for people who've missed the gym, there are a few online options that can hold you over until you can head back to your favorite gym. If you are already a gym goer, you're used to some level of intensity in your exercise. That's precisely what K1 Fitness is offering. Fitness trainer K1 Samuels is on Facebook and Instagram, offering tips for at-home exercises. He provides a paid option for online personal training. But there are plenty of free half-hour workouts that you can access on his YouTube page. No gym equipment? No problem. He'll have you working up a sweat with full water bottles as weights or even weightless exercise options. If you'd like to do some high-intensity workouts with some company, then head over to Facebook or Instagram and find Monica Habet. The health and fitness coach offers a live workout session daily at 9 a.m. on both her Facebook and Instagram pages. She also shares individual exercises and circuits that you can do when it's most convenient for you. Monica also provides private online coaching services. Maybe high intensity isn't your thing and you're looking for more flexibility, stretching, and relaxation? Then there are 2 yoga options available online. On Instagram, find Belize Yoga Mom. Yoga instructor Rachel Rowe offers 2 live classes a week. One gentle class that is especially good for beginners and one power class for those who want a little bit more intensity. She also uploads some 30-minute sessions for yogis who need some quick relaxation. Meanwhile, Ashanti Garcia, owner and instructor of Airbender Yoga Studio, has taken her classes entirely online. She'd always offered online participation, but all her classes are now live online due to the state of emergency regulations. She offers classes from Monday to Saturday, and there's even a Mother's Day promotion this May that moms can join a class for $10. And if you're a runner, there are some fun stuff online for you too. It's no at-home workout, but it will push you to keep on running. Go to totaltime.bz.com where you can participate in virtual 5Ks and 10Ks. There's no mass gathering here. Runners run on their own schedule and submit their time logs and even earn certificates for their participation. It's much different than competing, but it can definitely keep you consistent with your running routine. Whichever you choose, just remember that exercise is essential to your overall well-being. It can reduce your stress, prevent weight gain, improve your sleep, and even boost your immune system. And that's the news. Don't forget that tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/News5Live. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us, and from all of us here at News 5, please remember to wash your hands, keep your social distance, stay home, and stay safe. Good night.